Hi Five Shannon. Now it's time for the last part of chapter 10 and moving on into chapter 11 of our book Outlaw. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks Liv for enjoying it so much. It makes it better for me to do.
Completely disinterested in anything that did not serve the single purpose. He needed 2,000 more good men. He wanted Robin to recruit them and train them. He needed to raise taxes for the campaign. But the people have been taxed enough for foreign wars, sire, Robin said. They need their king at home. Richard smiled at him, but there was an edge to his tone. You stick to what you're good at, Robin, he said. Find me soldiers, train them well as you trained the outlaws. That's all I ask. And Robin did as he was asked, although he was beginning to wonder why his advice on all other matters was so often ignored. Among his soldiers, amongst the people of London, he was a hero. He was Robin of Sherwood. He was a legend. His exploits in Sherwood, his rescue of the king, were the talk of the taverns. Amongst the courtiers, though, he was just a jumped-up common forester with a white-haired cagot, or cago, I don't know, for a wife, but all the same a man to be beware of and to flatter, for they knew he was as close to the king as anyone, so wherever he went, in court or out of it, he was fawned on and lionised. Marian looked on helpless as Robin changed before her eyes. His fame and fortune were going to his head, and he did not seem to notice it. He was beginning to believe in the legend. She confided her fears to Robin's father. I'm losing him, she said. He's never at home. Something is always more important, even than little Martin. But Robin's father could be of little comfort to her. He too no longer knew his son. He does not listen to me any more, nor to anyone but the king, he said. He treats his faithful much as if he is not there. He leaves poor Tuck to drink himself into a stupor in the taverns, and his mind always seems to be elsewhere. If we could only go home to Sherwood, then he would find himself again. I know he would. One night Robin came bursting in, later even than usual. Marian and his father were sitting before the fire. He could not contain himself. You'll never guess, he cried. I am to be made a knight. Robin Hood, outlaw and outcast, is to be made a knight. What do you think of that? Tomorrow I shall be Sir Robin of Locksley. The king let me choose my title, and you shall be my Lady Marian. Marian looked him straight in the eye as she spoke. Never, Robin. Never as long as I live. I am no lady. I am Marian, mother of our child, and your companion in life. I have stayed long enough in this place. It is too comfortable and full of sycophants and title seekers. There is corruption in the very air we breathe. Tomorrow I shall go home to Sherwood, and I shall take little Martin with me. We do not belong here. But why? Said Robin, unable to believe what he was hearing. I was the wife of Robin Hood, a fair man, a kind man, a thinking man, who sought only good for others, who loved his friends and was loved by them. Now he has become someone else, someone I cannot love, cannot live with. I too will go home, Robin, said his father. Home to Sherwood, where we all belong. We are fish out of water here. See what has become of Tuck. See what has become of you. Listen to us, Robin. Come with us now, before it's too late. But I can't. The king. The king! The king! Always the king! Marian cried. The king is not God, Robin. Have you forgotten that? Have you forgotten yourself entirely? And Robin knew then that he had, but his pride would not let him say so. I stay with my king, he said, turning away. You go if you like. On to chapter 11. Deadly Nightshade. At dawn the next day, Marian and little Martin and Robin's father made ready to leave. Much was there to help them. Take care of him, Much, said Marian as she mounted her horse, and bring him back to Sherwood when he's himself again. Bring him home safe. I shall come with you, said Much, lifting up little Martin and setting him astride the saddle in front of her. But I cannot abandon him. I know that, Marian said, and she leant down and kissed him. Tell him I love him, and I'll be waiting for him in Sherwood. I have left him the silver arrow. He'll know why. Don't let him lose it. From an upper window, Robin watched them leave, but he could not bring himself to go down to say goodbye. As they rode away, he lifted the silver arrow and waved it, but none of them saw it. And when they had gone, Much came into his room and found Robin sitting on his bed and crying like a child. The silver arrow lay on his lap. "You're a fool, Robin Hood," said Much. "I know it," Robin replied. "I know it." King Richard knighted him that same day on the river meadow where the bowmen trained. But even as the blade rested on his shoulder, Robin felt no pleasure in it, no pride, only a deep longing for Marion and for Sherwood. The entire court was there, Prince John with them, looking as sour as ever. 2,000 bowmen waved their bows and cheered Robin to the echo as he rose to his feet to be embraced by the king. He saw Much and Little John standing some way off, but in their eyes there was nothing but disappointment. He looked everywhere for Tuck, but could see him nowhere. The king held him at arm's length. "Well done, Sir Robin of Locksley," he began. "You have come a long, long way from your woods, and you shall go farther too. I leave on my crusade in 2 weeks. If the winds are fair, come with me as my captain, Robin. With you beside me, we shall defeat Saladin, and we shall march together through the gates of Jerusalem." "And your own kingdom, sire?" said Robin. "What becomes of your kingdom while you are gone?" "My brother John will manage without me. He has learnt his lesson, have you not, brother?" And Prince John looked down at his feet and said nothing. "Do we ever learn our lessons, I wonder, before it is too late, sire?" said Robin. "I belong here. I belong in England." "So, you will not come?" The king was suddenly angry. "No, sire, I will stay at home and guard your kingdom for you while you are gone. When a shepherd leaves his sheep, sire, it does not leave them unguarded." "And I stay too, sire," said Little John. "I have made you all the swords you need for your crusade. Where Robin is, I must be." "Then go back to your woods for all I care," cried the king. "I shall take Jerusalem without you." And he turned on his heel and walked away. It took all that day for the three of them to find Tuck. Little John knew most of his drinking haunts, but he was not to be found in any of them. Then one tavern keeper, who knew him well, told them that Tuck had left his tavern 2 days before, saying he had finished with drink forever, and that from then on he would be praying his way back to God. So they searched every church and chapel in London and found him at last, kneeling before the altar of St. Bartholomew the Great in Smithfield. When he looked up and saw them, he covered his face with his hands and wept. "Take me home, boys," he said. "Take me home." They set off at first light and rode north all day without stopping, making over 40 miles by nightfall. Even so, they had still not caught up with Marion and Robin's father as they had expected. "They cannot be far ahead of us now," said Little John. "But if we ride at night, we might ride past them without knowing it. Let's find somewhere to sleep. We'll start out again early tomorrow morning. We'll catch up with them soon enough." There were no inns nearby, or monasteries, or priories, so they made camp in a wood and ate together round a fire as they'd done so often before. It was a damp and foggy night, and they lay huddled close to the fire for warmth. But despite all they could do, Tuck would not stop shivering. By morning he had a fever, and Much had to help him onto his horse. Slumped and silent in his saddle, Tuck rode on, uncomplaining, all through the next day and the next, but they had to go at a walk now, and there was still no sign of Marion and the others on the road. Heavy rain and a fierce whipping wind forced them to stop early on the third day. Tuck was coughing almost continuously by this time, and Robin knew that to go on would be the death of him. He needed a rest, he needed a doctor, and so when they came to a nunnery on the outskirts of a small village, they hammered on the door and asked for shelter, for help. The nuns took them in and did all they could. For 2 days and 2 nights, Tuck tossed and turned in his fever, near to death. They bled him with leeches, but that did not help. They bathed him in cold water to cool him, but that only seemed to make him worse. The nuns worked tirelessly, but Tuck sank into a deep sleep and would not wake. His breathing became shallow and rasping. Much and Little John and Robin sat by his bed, praying and waiting for the end. One of the nuns came in to pray with them. As she was about to leave the room, she said, "I don't know much about these things, and I don't want to raise false hopes, but I do know of someone, an abbess, a healer who lives nearby. She has been known to heal when all other remedies have failed." "Then send for her," cried Robin, "and hurry, please, hurry." That evening an unseen face peered through the grille of the cell where Tuck lay surrounded by his companions, all on their knees and praying. The face smiled, but it was a cold and venomous smile. Then the face vanished. The same nun brought their supper to the cell, leek soup. "The abbess, the healer," said Robin. "Where is she? Will she be long?" "In the kitchens," replied the nun, preparing a medicine for him. "She won't be long. You should eat your soup. It'll give you strength. And besides, all waste is wicked in the Lord's eyes. And with that she left. Little John tried the soup first. It was good and peppery, he said. Robin drank it, more to warm himself than anything else, for his feet were frozen. Only Much refused it. He sat closest to Tuck, his eyes never leaving Tuck's face, not for an instant. Minutes later the door opened and a nun was there again. "I have the good friar's medicine," she said, "and the abbess said I was to pour it down his throat. I will need you to lift him for me, else he may choke." "But if she has not seen him," Robin asked, "how does she know what to give him?" "I asked her the same thing," replied the nun. "She said it's a universal remedy, and she is a holy woman. We must have faith." And with Much holding Tuck in his arms, she poured the medicine into Tuck's mouth and wiped his lips afterwards. "He's in God's hands now," she said, crossing herself, and then she left him. She had been gone only a few moments when Robin began to feel his head swirling, a gripping pain in his stomach and a sickly taste in his mouth that reminded him of the terrible sea voyage he had made. He clutched at the bed to stop himself from falling, but he could not. When he opened his eyes, he saw Little John sprawling beside him on the floor. He was reaching out towards him, his face contorted with pain, his eyes wide with fear. "The soup," whispered Little John. "We're poisoned. We're dead men." And Robin felt the first shudder of death come over him and knew it too. Much was bending over him, trying to lift him. "Help me up, Much," said Robin. "I want to see the trees once more before I die, and I will die standing, looking my God in the face." And he stood by the window, looking, the colour draining from his cheeks. He leant back on Much and looked his last at the trees and at the sky. The abbess. It was the abbess. I should have known. Too late, too late. The abbess of Kirkley. It could be no one else. "She has done for us much. You did not eat your soup, did you?" "No, Robin." "Dear Much, always wise," Robin breathed, "wise and silent. Give me my bow now, and Marion's silver arrow. I shall shoot one last time through this window, and where the arrow lies, there you must bury us. Tell her I am sorry, and that I love her. Care for them as you have cared for me." He had not the strength to draw the bow himself, but with Much's help he lifted it, felt his thumb touch his nose, looked along the arrow to where its silver tip, and let fly. He never saw where it landed, for he was dead. I'm going to leave it there, so we've got one more bit to go. That was a bit of an ending, wasn't it? That abbess is mean. On reflection, I decided I couldn't actually leave it there, so I've carried on. Much the miller's son laid Robin in his grave the next morning, his horn, his bow, and his silver arrow beside him, and on either side of him he dug 2 other graves, one for Little John and one for Friar Tuck. Above each he placed a cross of English oak, but with no inscription, for Much could not write. The nuns sang over him, blessed them and wished them to heaven. Then left them where they lay. As Much was about to leave, a rust-red squirrel ran along a branch above him and dropped a nut at his feet, an acorn. He planted it in the soft, cold earth of Robin's grave. "So I'll always know where to find you, Robin," he said. "I have to go now, back to Sherwood, but first to Kirkley." He was there by noon and waiting in the shadows of the cloisters. The abbess, still exulting, did not see him until he stepped out in front of her. Then she knew him at once, what he had come for. She tried to escape, but Much held her fast. "You ate deadly nightshaved, and you lived," she cried. "You killed the best heart in all of England," said Much, "but I will not kill you here in this holy place, nor will you ever lie in sanctified ground. You lived for the devil, and now you can go to him." He took her away far from the abbey and hanged her from a wych elm tree and buried her deep in the corner of a field of stubble where no one could ever find her, and her body would not taint the corn. By the time Much came to Sherwood again, there was snow on the ground. He found the house on the edge of the forest and saw the smoke rising from the chimney and saw little Martin pottering by the door with Robin's father and Marion chopping wood. For weeks he lived out in the cold, keeping watch over them, but never wanting to make himself known, for he knew what news he would have to tell her. In the end, it was she who found him. She was out hunting early one morning, stalking a deer, when she came across him crouching over a dying fire. He looked into her eyes, unable to speak. "I know," she said. "I've known for weeks. If he was alive, he'd have come home. I know he would." She held out her hands to him. "Did he tell you to look after us?" she asked, smiling. "Thought so. Then come with me much, and do as he says." They walked a little while together in silence. "Never tell me how it happened," she said, taking his arm. "It's in life I want to remember him, not death." When I woke, I found myself on my side in the mud and the cold, and in my hand still tightly grasped the silver arrowhead. A jay cackled somewhere nearby and brought me to my senses. I sat up and remembered. I remembered the hurricane the night before, sheltering with Gran under the stairs, the roe deer by the stream, but it all seemed to have happened such a long time ago. I saw about me the devastated forest, and my tree, my poor dead tree, and there were the bones in the earth beside me, and the skull I had dropped, the cow's horn, and the long curved stick. But I knew there was more, much more that I should have remembered, but could not. I felt there was an echo of a dream inside me, but that it was unreachable now and always would be. I struggled to my feet and looked about me. God knows how long I'd been there. Clouds scudded across the sky, chasing away the storm. It felt like midday. Gran would be out of her mind with worry. I had to get back. I buried the bones where I found them, scooped the earth over hurriedly and left. I took the horn and the silver arrowhead and the long curved stick with me. It seemed a pity just to bury them. I would take them home and clean them up. Maybe, I thought, maybe I could take them to the British Museum and find out how old they were. I could come back later and fill the crater properly so no one would ever find the bones. It was my tree, so they were my bones. Later, though, I would do it all later. I was halfway down the hill when I saw the berries. There were a dozen or more, black as big and as big as cherries. I felt suddenly hungry. I filled my hand with them and walked on. I would have eaten them there and then, but I hadn't a hand free to do it. Anyway, they'd be good in yoghurt with a lot of sugar on top. I would save them and have a feast when I got home. I hurried on, dropping one or two of the berries as I went. I hid my treasures away back at the back of the garage before I went in. I said I was sorry. I'd been so long. But Gran said she didn't know what I was talking about. I'd only been gone for half an hour. At most, she rolled the berries hand to hand, smelt them, and looked at me anxiously over her glasses. "You haven't eaten any of these, have you?" she asked. "No," I said. She took a deep breath. "Well, thank goodness for that. This is deadly nightshade, a tropobelladonna, poisonous, deadly poisonous. You'd better wash your hands and the rest of you while you're about it. Lord, you're a mess. Mud all over you. Look at you. What you need is a good bath. Upstairs." I washed everything in the bath, my hands first and then my treasures. There was a lot of mud in the bath by the time I'd finished. So I ran it out and ran another one. Then Gran called upstairs and told me to turn it off. That what with the electricity off and all the hot water we were going to get for a while was in the tank. And what was I doing having 2 baths anyway? So I washed the rest of me in the basin and scrubbed my treasures till they were as clean as I could get them. I put my tongue out in the mirror. I put my tongue out at myself in the mirror. "Idiot," I said to me. "You could have killed yourself." Once in my bedroom, I hid away all my treasures, the stick behind my cupboard, the arrowhead and the cow's horn under my shirts in my chest of drawers. Every day after that, I took a spade and went back to the woods to fill in the crater left by my tree. It was a mammoth task of shoveling and hacking and shoveling again, but after a week or so I'd filled it right in and stamped it down. I was sure now that no one would ever find the bones again. They were safe from the timbermen, who would no doubt be moving in with their heavy machinery, and safe from grave robbers. But the bones would not leave me alone. Night after night I lay there, and could think of nothing else. Something was unfinished, not right. The bones would not let me sleep. On just one such sleepless night, when Gran had gone up to bed and the house was quiet, I got up and spread my treasures out on my duvet in the moonlight. That was what when I thought of it, I was the grave robber. My treasures had to go back, then the bones would let me sleep. It was a starry night, crisp and cold. I pulled off my coat over my dressing gown and stepped barefoot into my Wellingtons and fetched the shovel. The stream runs louder at night. It was all I heard as I ran through the woods, back to where my tree lay, its bark covered in frost. I dug deep and buried them all together, the stick, the horn and the arrowhead. I covered them in and left them quickly, before I could change my mind. I stopped because I heard something that was not the stream, but the trees seemed to be whispering in the wind. But there were no trees, and there was no wind. "Son of Marian," came the whisper again. "Son of Robin, God bless, God bless." And then I remembered my dream, every bit of it, and I have never forgotten it. I have never forgotten the place either, but I might have, had I not planted the acorn. It was an acorn from my tree, from Robin's tree. I cleared the space over the grave, much the miller's son had done. Before me, I nurtured the green shoot into a young oak sapling. I let no seed grow nearby. I let no tree take its light. 5 years on, and it's twice my height already. 500 years on, and it'll be the most magnificent tree in the whole forest, just as it always was. Robin will like that. I know he will. That's the end of our story. It was nice going back to where we found out from the very start of the story. Do you remember the boy in the storm and his tree coming down? I'd almost forgotten about it in the story of Robin Hood. I hope you enjoyed it, everybody. Okay, bye-bye.